Hello and welcome back to Medium Rare, everyone. My name is Rag Reynolds, and today I'm talking about something a little bit closer to home for me. This is something about Scotland. This is something that's happening here right now, and it's something that I'm quite concerned about. And a lot of people here are rightfully concerned about this, and it concerns our freedoms, our freedom of speech. And now, you could argue that in Scotland right now, we don't even really have freedom of speech. And that's because we have hate speech laws in place. So, for example, people can go to jail here for telling offensive jokes. And one of the big examples of that was YouTuber Dinkled, who just a few years ago was sentenced and convicted as a criminal because of a joke comedy video he uploaded to his YouTube channel where he had essentially taught his girlfriend's dog to do a Nazi salute as a joke. The whole point of the video was, oh, I really wanted to annoy my girlfriend, so I took the thing she loved most in the world and I'm going to corrupt it and make it the most horrible thing I can think of in the world. And so he has a video of the dog sitting watching Hitler. Clearly a joke. This is clearly comedic. Whether you think it's funny or not, clearly comedic intent. And the dog responds to "Seek Hail" by raising its paw. Now, whether or not you agree with this joke, whether or not you think it is funny, it's disgusting or whatever, I think most reasonable people can all agree that no one should be convicted. No one should be classed as a criminal for telling such a joke. But that is exactly what happened to Count Dankula. And he is but one example. He is just the widest known example of this happening in Scotland. This has happened to numerous people for saying all sorts of things. People have gone to jail for this. Anyway, if that wasn't bad enough, the Scottish government are now seeking to push a new hate crime bill through Parliament into our legal system that would curtail freedom of speech so much more. And now I'm not exaggerating in the slightest when I tell you that this bill would essentially make it illegal for you to have offensive memes on your computer. All those children, all those school kids who have got mobile phones, who have got offensive pictures, offensive memes that they're sending to their friends, those people would now all be liable to face criminal charges. Now, this is so ridiculous that you could actually face up to 7 years in prison for possessing offensive images. And now, just as some context to that as well, if you possess inappropriate pictures of minors, CP, if you possess that on any of your devices, do you know what the maximum sentence is? 10 years in prison. Only 3 years more for that than if you have an offensive image on your device. If that isn't insane to you, if that doesn't sound Orwellian to you, I don't know what to tell you. Anyway, this is a bill that is being pushed through Parliament by a guy called Humza Yousaf, and I'm not a fan of the guy in the first place. He's made a lot of statements, a lot of different speeches that I really find quite ridiculous, but we're not getting into any of that. We're talking specifically about this bill. But before we get into it, I want to tell you, this bill is surprisingly so unpopular that even the police are against it. The police have spoken out against this bill. The media in general seem to be against this bill. If you Google Scotland hate crime bill, what comes up are all these people talking bad about the bill. The first thing that comes up, Scottish Government's illiberal hate crime bill must be sent to the knackers. That is how bad, this is how horrible this bill is. That's how terrible and ridiculous it is. That people seem to be in unity about it, saying that it is horrible, ridiculous, and violates freedom of speech. And so Humza here is on Twitter. He's written an article trying to defend the bill. And so he says here, I have taken numerous bills through Parliament. With each one, I've accepted amendments to find common ground and consensus. The hate crime bill will be no different. My team and I are actively looking at areas of compromise. In turn, I ask opponents for two things. One, engage in the actual substance of the bill, and two, let's also listen to the many minority groups, faith, disability, equality groups, and others who support the bill to understand why. In turn, I will listen to those who oppose. But if you read underneath, you see from Count Dankula here, who we just spoke about, hey Humza, I'm very happy to engage in the substance of the bill, as are many other UK and Scotland-based free speech organisations. Your entire party, and most of all you, refuse to engage in any kind of conversation with us about this bill. Stop stop lying. Count Dankula also posted this screenshot on his Twitter saying, Humza, guys, please engage us honestly about the hate crime bill. Let's talk about it then. Humza. Scene. So, Count Dankula sent a message and he's ignored it. And honestly, if you know anything about what's going on here, it is quite clear that these people, they don't actually care about having a discussion about the bill. They don't give a damn. And now here is this article that Humza has written to try and back up his bill, and it says, hate crime bill does not undermine free speech. It protects it. If I wasn't so appalled by this, I would be hysterical. I'd be laughing. Because that is such a ridiculous statement. This hate crime bill, by essence, is all about restricting what you label as offensive or hate speech. It's about censoring hate, essentially. And now, this may be something that some of you people watching don't agree with, but I believe it to be a fact that if you are censoring any sort of speech, other than, say, for example, threats, credible for threats, then you are censoring freedom of speech. You're taking away freedom of speech. Hate speech, as it is called, hateful speech, is still covered as free speech. Okay? Hate speech is appalling. It's horrible. It's things that people probably should not say. They're horrible things to say. However, that doesn't mean that you should be prosecuted for saying hateful things. Okay? Hate speech, by definition, is protected by freedom of speech. And that's something I see people arguing about a lot. People will say, oh, hate speech is not free speech. Actually, it is. Okay? If freedom of speech isn't a protecting speech that you find hateful or offensive or appalling or horrible, then what is it protecting? Why do you need to protect speech that no one takes offense to? Why do you need to protect speech that the majority of people already agree with? The reason freedom of speech exists is so that fringe opinions and alternate forms of thinking can exist, so that people can voice other opinions, whether those be hateful or grotesquely offensive or whatever it is. That's why freedom of speech exists. And so I believe that if you are someone who thinks that hate speech should not be covered by free speech, then I personally do not believe that you are truly in favour of actual free speech. And I mean, that's not a problem. You can not be in favour of that all you want. We can have that disagreement. But that's just how I feel about it. And now one of the big things here that we're going to get into a little bit with this bill as well is, how do you define hate speech? Because everyone has a different idea of what's hateful. Christians are going to really find it hateful and horrible when you're talking bad about Christianity. They're going to say you're speaking hate speech. Muslims are going to say the same when you're speaking bad about Islam. But Christians might not say the same when it's the other way around, if you know what I'm saying. So Christians might not care that you're speaking bad about Islam, but people who follow Islam are going to care that you're speaking bad about Islam. And vice versa. They're not going to care you're speaking bad about Christianity, but Christians are going to care that you're speaking bad about Christianity. That's just one example. Everyone has a different idea of what constitutes hate speech. And it seems clear to me as well that the people pushing this agenda, they're not for, oh, this is hateful, that's hateful. For example, this bill covers stirring up hatred. Speech that is likely to incite hatred is something that will be criminalized by this hate crime bill. It's something that will be classed as a hate crime. So for example, we have SNP in power, the Scottish Nationalist Party. They could say that criticising the SNP in certain ways is stirring up hatred. It's making people hate the SNP. So in that sense, they could say, okay, you are now a criminal for criticising the SNP. But I guarantee you that if you are criticising their opponents, you criticise the Conservative Party, you say F those Tories, I guarantee you they're not going to make those exact same arguments there. They're not going to care that you're stirring up hatred there now, are they? If you say F poor people, you might be stirring up hatred to poor people. But if you say F the rich, eat the rich, are you stirring up hatred to the rich? But being logical about this, they're both the exact same thing. I guarantee you if you say F gay people, they're going to say, okay, that's a hate crime, you're going to jail. If you say F straight people, it is the exact same thing. but they're not going to send you to jail because they have an agenda. They don't care. What they're trying to do here is police your speech and police your thoughts. And so if you read through this bill, the hate crime bill aims to create a careful balance that supports and protects our shared freedoms. Over the past week, I have read in detail the concerns raised about the implications of the bill, particularly around freedom of speech. And Humza, if you actually cared for freedom of speech, you would abandon this bill. Free speech is a fundamental part of Scottish democracy. What a joke. It really isn't. It really is not a fundamental part of Scottish democracy. We do not have freedom of speech in Scotland. Fact. Protecting the rights of individuals and groups to voice their views on issues that matter to them is central to the Scottish Government's aim of creating an open, diverse and progressive country. I think that statement alone kind of tells you where they're going with this. What they want is for people who they agree with, people who are on the same agenda as they are, people who are going for the same things. They want those people to be able to push for the things they want. So they're happy for LGBTQ groups to voice their agendas and whatever, and that's fine. I think it's good that those people can voice their agendas and do whatever. But they want to then shut down people who disagree with these people. They want to shut down anyone who has a different agenda. Those are the things that are going to be called hate crimes. At its heart, this is what the bill seeks to protect. In order for everyone in Scotland to enjoy equal freedoms, we must protect the parts of our society that are vulnerable from those who would seek to abuse those freedoms. That is such messed up logic. They're essentially saying that certain marginalised groups need other speech to be suppressed because it's hateful. And until that happens, these groups don't truly have freedom of speech. And that's what the whole argument is here. That's why he's trying to say that this actually protects freedom of speech. He's trying to say that this bill actually protects freedom of speech for these people who feel as though people are being hateful towards them. It's some really twisted logic. It's important because hate crime has real life consequences. To be attacked or targeted simply because of who you are is a frightening experience. I know this from personal experience. Hey, I'm not going to disagree. I'm sure it's horrible to be targeted for who you are. I am not going to agree, and I have sympathy for anyone who faces that sort of thing. But do you really think that censoring people's speech is the way to go about this? Censoring people's freedoms, is that really the way to go about this? Just because a small minority of people are abusing their right to free speech, that doesn't mean that you should take away free speech from everyone else in the country. And also, implementing this bill does not suddenly guarantee that hate crimes will never happen again. Having a hate crime bill does not mean that these people will suddenly no longer be targeted. They will just be targeted in certain ways. Making speech illegal does not stop hate. It just doesn't. What it does is it makes the people who are being hateful be more careful, more selective. It makes them think smarter and, actually makes them harder to identify. Later down in this article he says, so in response to the concerns that have been raised, let me set out categorically that the bill will not prevent people from expressing controversial, challenging or even offensive views. But that's literally not true. It's not true at all. The whole point of this bill is to stop hateful speech. Speech that can be perceived as stirring up hate. And so by that very promise of the bill, you are censoring freedom of speech. You are censoring people from expressing their controversial, challenging and offensive views. This is a straight up lie. And in fact, this is something people are already prosecuted in Scotland for. Count Dankula, as one example, has already been prosecuted in Scotland for this. For having a controversial joke out there. It will not prevent people from having or expressing religious views or materials, and it will not stifle journalist freedoms. Ha! Not true again. It's honestly so ridiculous. This bill would literally reintroduce blasphemy laws into the country because speaking against a certain religion would be considered stirring up hatred and therefore illegal. I've read through the rest of this article and honestly, it doesn't get better. The whole thing is him just trying to justify this terrible, terrible bill. This bill that is so terrible, the police have spoken out against. The police have said it's so bad that they don't want it. This man is lying about this bill in this article, and you can actually read the entire bill yourself. The bill is out there for everyone to read. I'm going to link this in the description down below in case anyone's interested, so you can actually read through what is actually in this bill, because this man is lying. He is straight up lying in this article about his bill. One of the things you'll notice if you do look through this is there's a lot of mention to the intention to stir up hatred. Intention. And this is something that is very important to acknowledge and important to focus on. Because when you get prosecuted for this type of thing, the prosecution will essentially argue about what your intent was. They will act as though they can read your thoughts better than you can. They will know what you intended when you were doing certain things. And this is something, again, going back to the Count Dankula case. When he was in court, the prosecution argued that Count Dankula had intended to radicalize viewers, to stir up hatred against Jewish people. They claimed essentially to know better than him what his intentions were and what he was thinking in his head. And that's without this bill. That's without the horrible Orwellian nightmare that is this hate crime bill. And this here that I'm showing you now, this is section 5, offences of possessing inflammatory material. This is probably the most ridiculous part of this entire bill. Section 5 creates an offence of possession of racially inflammatory material. It provides there is an offence for a person to have in their possession threatening, abusive, or insulting material with a view to communicating the material to another person with either the intention to stir up hatred against a group of persons based on the group being defined by reference to race, colour, nationality, including citizenship, or ethnic or national origins, or where it's likely that, if the material were communicated, hatred will be stirred up against such groups. So, it's not even just about intent here. It's about if you have something in your possession, any sort of material that someone could perceive as potentially stirring up hatred if it was sent out, you could now go to prison for 7 years. And now you might be sitting there watching this video thinking, oh, but why would I have that sort of image on me in the first place? Well, two things. One, what if someone sends you an image? What if a troll online decides, okay, I'm going to send this horrible racist meme towards you? Oh, you now are actually technically in possession of this racist meme in your emails, in your DMs, wherever it is. You have possession of this. Technically, you have now committed a crime. You're now a criminal for having this thing on you. Aside from that, who, again, is determining what classes as hateful material? Who determines what is able to stir up hate and what isn't? It's so vague, it's such a slippery slope. And this goes on and it starts talking about other things other than just race. I mean, even age is one of the categories here. Age, disability, religion. So really what you could say is any sort of meme, any sort of joke. So, I mean, just think about it. There are teens all over the country who have memes on their phone that maybe make fun of boomers, for example. They're talking about old people. That would now be classed as stirring up hatred. That would be a crime that you could go to prison for 7 years over because you have an image on your phone calling some old man a boomer. Clearly a joke, but you could argue that it could stir up hatred if shared. And hence suddenly, oh no, you are now a criminal, you have committed a hate crime. Anyway, I'm going to stop now. I've ranted for too much. This video is probably a little bit of a mess. I'm not sure how I'm going to edit this. I've gone on about a million different rants. I've been recording for 50 minutes and this video should only be about 10 hopefully once I actually edit it. I do encourage you to check out this link to this bill in the description down below and let me know what you're thinking about it as well, because honestly this terrifies me. I think it's horrible, I think it's terrifying, and it makes me fear for the future of my country. Anyway, as always, be sure to check out the links in the description down below and I'll see you all in the next video.